Today, I'm going to talk about a controversial topic. I'm going to talk about why our medical systems around the world are failing patients with osteoporosis and osteopenia. I want to spend some time on my perspective as an orthopedic surgeon that practiced in the traditional medical model and now practices in the functional/integrative health optimization space. Why I went from an insurance-based practice to a cash-based practice and my experience in both. And I really want to help people to protect themselves from certain cash pay principles, but also to protect themselves from this weird combo that can happen in between, which is people wanting to use their insurance for things that are not really covered by their insurance company, and the disaster that I've seen happen from multiple patients and lots of comments on YouTube. So I wanted to get into this concept of why your insurance company, potentially your doctor, single payer systems, why none of them can care for osteoporosis the way that a cash pay system can, and what you can look for in a cash pay practice that will help to protect yourself from potentially getting a bill that you're not expecting. So stick around. We're going to talk about this kind of emotional and controversial topic, and I'm going to give you my experience of what I've seen and where I've seen people really run into some trouble and having to spend money that they didn't plan on spending, and how you can protect yourself. All right, so out of the gate, I want to answer this question. Is the traditional medical system failing people with osteoporosis? I think the resounding answer is yes, based off of the feedback that I'm getting on this channel, the popularity of this channel. If we could get what we needed to get from our primary care doctors or endocrinologist or whomever we're seeking treatment from, then I wouldn't need to do this, and you wouldn't need to be here. But you are here, and I am doing this because diseases like osteoporosis, arguably diabetes, coronary artery disease, heart attack, stroke, dementia prevention, all of these things, which ironically are the top 4 causes of death in the United States, but all of these things are poorly managed by our traditional healthcare system. And this is not just true in the US, this is true around the world. And I have been really amazed at our population on YouTube, this channel. We are 40% international, which means that we are really impacting people around the world, which is amazing, but also says that this is a problem that exists around the world. And so single payer systems in other countries outside of the US have clearly not figured this out. And so I want to talk a little bit about that as I go through this. But before we get there, I want to mention that in the US, and apparently also true across the world, no one owns osteoporosis. No one wants it. No doctors, no group of doctors, no subspecialty seems to want to take on osteoporosis as an entity. And I think the reason for that is that they don't have a good answer, right? Within the system that doctors practice, within that system, they don't have time to do a comprehensive approach. They don't have the understanding of exercise, of nutrition that is required to impact the lifestyle pillars that are critical for treating all of those things that I just mentioned. And then the drugs that we have access to as doctors, they can serve a role, and I have videos on those if you haven't seen them, but the failure rate of patients not wanting to take them is up to 80%. People just don't want to take them. The risks are too great. The benefits or perceived benefits are not high enough. And so that's a big problem. Doctors don't want to be in that situation. That would be an unsatisfying practice to have, right? So nobody wants to do it. In addition, because of that, maybe, the risk and rates of osteoporosis are going up. Fracture rates are going up, screening's going down, and there's no clear long-term plan. Doctor sees a patient in their 50s with osteoporosis. What are they going to tell them to do for the next 30 years? They can talk to them about risk and what to do over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, maybe 10 years, but after that? So it's just not a position where doctors really want to find themselves. And that's why I think we don't see doctors, raising their hands and jumping up and down to claim osteoporosis in their subspecialty. I just don't think that that's something that doctors want to do, because they do really want to help people, and they can focus on something that they are good at that will actually impact people better. All right, so this is kind of a challenging area especially to do globally, because every country has a different healthcare system. And I would argue that based off of what I know, that no country has figured this out. And so in the US, we have, obviously, for those of you in the US, you know this, we have private insurance companies and we have our single payer system. We have Medicare and Medicaid, or CMS, as I'll call it. In other countries, England and Australia, we have a big following. In other countries in Europe, there are some single payer systems that have some variations to that. But again, it doesn't seem like those are treating people any better in this way. And I'll talk a little bit about why. In the US, it's really important to understand. I tell this to people all the time when they say, why doesn't my insurance company pay for these things that I need, this nutrition, this exercise? They would save so much money. Maybe. The thing that people don't usually know is that the average lifespan of a patient as a customer, if you will, of an insurance company is about 3 years. So really, the insurance companies are kind of playing like a hot potato with their clients. They don't necessarily want to invest in somebody who is going to leave them as a client in the next 12 to 36 months. And so this is an area where it would make sense that a single payer system that has you for life might be better. But remember, in the US, if you're under 65 and you're not a part of the CMS system yet, that your private insurance company, some of them do have some interesting benefits around nutrition, but for the most part, that's really not what they're interested in, unless there is an altruistic purpose behind it, which would be awesome if that were true. The single payer systems, I think that, I've never been a managing member of any of these systems, obviously, but my perspective is that if you had a customer, a patient, a citizen for life, that you would be more interested in these prevention things. And I would love some feedback in the comments actually on this of what is perceived in the countries of people that are watching this, particularly England, Australia, other European countries, where single payer systems do seem to pay for some really interesting benefits that are very, very different than the US. But overall, it's hard for people to find the things that I feel like my patients need, which is they need accountability, they need nutrition advice, they need gut work, they need functional testing, they need lifestyle counseling. We need to talk about sleep. We need to put people on a customized exercise program. We need to get biomarkers that are going to show us what we need to know for bone health and other things, so that we can talk about supplements and hormones, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't see that happening in a single payer system, but it does seem like they are more interested in lifestyle and prevention. But I would love some feedback on that. So if anybody wants to put that in the comments, that'd be awesome. And so as I mentioned, osteoporosis, diabetes, coronary artery disease, dementia, all of those things require more stuff than your doctor has time for, is likely trained for. And the treatment that we recommend and that people are doing in other functional or integrative practices, a lot of those things they just take up too much time and they might not be covered by insurance at all. And so when you look at some of these things, and I've talked to doctors about this, they say, well, look, I would love to offer this stuff, but I don't have a cash model. Like I don't have a way to bill a patient cash for something, like a peptide or a compounded product. Like they just don't have a system, and their hospital system or their practice might not be interested because the margins are smaller. They're not going to make as much money. And ultimately, they have to keep their doors open. So you end up with the traditional model just not really being able to do the things that people want them to do, and that would really move the needle from a bone health and all these other big chronic disease perspectives. All right, so you might wonder why I'm bringing this up. Well, I don't shy away from the fact that we are a cash pay practice. And the reason why I say that, and I say it boldly, is because I really feel like that treating something like osteoporosis, while it would be amazing if it were part of the system because it is important, same thing with all the other, biggest killers of adults in the US and the world, but it's not. And I would love for that to be the case. And I view a world in my vision of potentially having this Medicine 3.0 platform where people can get these things and get these things paid for. I'm not optimistic on when that will happen or if it will ever happen. But in the meantime, if we're going to be able to treat patients the way that we want to treat patients, we have to be able to use a cash pay system. And I just want to talk about kind of some of the things that these practitioners that are in the same boat as me struggle with, because a lot of times this is an unknown and we get a lot of negative feedback from people because we don't accept insurance. And I just want to speak to that a little bit because it's not just me. I'm not just defending myself here. we have almost 400,000 views on these videos a month right now. I can accept around 250 to 300 patients in my practice. So I'm here to educate thousands and hundreds of thousands of people because they're going to use people other than me. And they have to. I can't build a practice big enough to accommodate that. And so when you are looking at care from a functional provider, from an integrative provider, it's important that you understand these principles because you have to protect yourself to some extent because there are different ways to do this, different ways that we've tried to do this. And I want to talk a little bit about kind of the provider's perspective as a physician or as another type of provider, the business perspective, and then from the patient perspective, because there are some significant differences in how things are run from practice to practice. And you'll see different levels of cost. You'll see some that are outlandish, tens and tens of thousands of dollars versus some that seem like a couple $100. But the truth is that ultimately you end up kind of somewhere in between because of there are some things that are very consistent, but there are some inconsistencies and some unknowns. And I want to just chat about those. I want to dig into this by talking about the provider experience, which blends into the business experience, since most of us in the functional space generally run our own practices. And so it's important to remember that in an insurance-based practice, if you're billing a level 5 visit, which is clearly what we're doing, these are the most complex visits that you can bill to insurance, you're going to get between $150 and $200 in the US. Now, for me to prepare for a visit of this caliber, it takes me and my team about 6 hours. So that's a team of RDs with master's degrees. That's a team of PhDs in exercise physiology. That's multiple virtual assistants and administrative time, as well as my time as a double board certified physician. So imagine if you had a product that you sold for $200 and you had to pay that team out of that $200 for 6 hours worth of work. You can imagine it doesn't really work out very well. There are a lot of people that will try to combine, a lot of practices that will try to combine this. And I totally get this combination idea of insurance and cash. In the US, this is actually a pretty slippery slope because if CMS being Medicare, Medicaid, finds that you are billing people that potentially could be qualified for services and you're billing them a cash rate, you can actually go to jail. So this is an area where I'm not willing to compromise because I don't know that I would look good in orange. And so we have taken a very clear stance to say that we do not accept insurance and we do not talk to insurance companies, period. Now that said, there are plenty of people that do kind of bridge this gap, and they can do it in a couple of different ways. And some people will say, well, we don't take Medicare. Well, private insurance companies actually kind of do the same thing. They just don't have the force of the federal government behind them, but you can get in trouble either way. And then there are some ideas around, well, if I create different business structures and I have one EIN here and one tax ID there, then I can do this here and that there. And that is legitimate and legal, but I think that you really end up kind of crossing over and blurring lines, and it's so difficult to keep them separate. So then the patient experience is really important because ultimately this is what's going to affect you and matter to you. So from the patient experience, what we find is that when patients try to use providers that are kind of mixing a cash and insurance practice, a lot of times they'll end up paying more, and it's a surprise. So you can imagine that a surprise bigger bill is probably not as palatable as a known lower cost. And I want to talk a little bit about why. It has to do with this this percentage of reimbursement. And a really good example that I was very privy to as a surgeon was that when I would do a surgery, the hospital would bill out X amount for my surgery. So let's say I did like a hip fracture, right? Great example. So let's say I fix a hip fracture. The hospital says, all right, well, that cost, the cost for that hip fracture repair all in is whatever, $5,000. And several decades ago, insurance companies kind of caught wind of this and they're like, okay, cool. Well, we'll negotiate this with you and we'll pay you 60% of that. The hospital says, well, okay, so next time it's not $5,000. Now it's $10,000 because I want to recoup that $5,000. The insurance company says, okay, well, we'll pay you less, right? And so you get this like escalating thing. And so now there are these ludicrously elevated costs which insurance companies and hospitals can play the numbers game with all day long, but we get caught in the middle, both providers and patients. And here's how. So here's a great example. So let's say somebody wanted to run their labs through insurance. We deal with this question all the time. So in our practice, we wrap the cost of labs into the cost of the program because we know that we have negotiated cash rates, which are sometimes 10% or less of the insurance rates for this same lab draw, exact same study. And if you run it through insurance, it's true that your insurance may pay for it. You will have obviously a copay and a deductible and all this stuff. But let's say that you had great insurance, which is becoming less common, but let's say you had great insurance and they just paid for it. Cool. Until you get this letter from your insurance company that says, oh, actually this lab, yeah, we're not going to cover that. They just pick like 2 or 3 out of the list for whatever reason. Because the insurance rates are 10 times or more sometimes of the cash rates, you could end up for that 1 or 2 labs, those 1 or 2 labs, end up paying more to LabCorp or whomever than you would have if you just paid them all in cash. And I saw this happening and it was impossible to predict. And so you get people that would say, hey, look, man, you ordered these labs and now I have to pay $5,000. And it's like, sorry, like I know what the cost of our cash pay is, but I don't like to use insurance for this reason. And so we actually now have a hard line. We don't do that at all because I don't want people to get stuck with that unknown bill. And it's just silly. And so we've kind of wrapped that into the cost of the program. And that's why. Now, I see the same thing happening with functional testing. Some of the functional testing companies will say that they'll bill your insurance, and that sounds good, but then you end up paying more, or your insurance just says yes, and then they say no. And it just, this back and forth is just aggravating, and it delays care. And so for us, especially as a membership program, and a lot of practitioners are kind of in the same boat, where you're kind of a patient of theirs for a certain amount of time. You got a clock that's ticking, and I hate being inefficient in that scenario. And so I love to just get things done. Let's get treatment on the way. We have a problem we're trying to fix. Let's just fix it. So that's how we manage that. And that's where I see people getting into trouble. A couple areas, though, where we do kind of play this insurance game, although we don't do it ourselves. Imaging companies have gotten very good at pre-approving and negotiating with insurance companies. So that's an area where if we're doing, a DEXA is a great example. If it's something that could be covered by insurance, we can order it and we can code it, and most people will do that. And if they can cover it, they will. The imaging center is generally doing that work. Same thing with commercial drugs. Now, we don't use drugs very often, but if we were to use drugs and we were to prescribe them, then generally the pharmacy is doing the communication with the insurance company, and they're doing that negotiation on your behalf. And so that's an area, again, where insurance could potentially be used. But where we see this fall off is where people say, well, I want to use this for my compounding pharmacy, my peptides. I want to try to get this. I want to try to get that. My hormones. I want to try to get them approved. And then the insurance company says, oh, well, we can use this product, but not that product, and this one. And then they come back to us and they say, oh, well, they'll pay for this product, so then it's free. And then I look at it and it's 1/10 of the dose, and it's not going to do what we need it to do. And so this really aggravating back and forth is something that unfortunately a lot of people do have to deal with. All right. So in conclusion, I think it's important to understand that insurance companies, I don't want to say that they don't have your best interest in mind, but keep in mind that whether it be a private insurance company or a single payer system, they are really looking at the big picture. And when it comes to osteoporosis and these other diseases of decades, as I call the other ones too, these diseases of decades, they don't do a good job because it's really hard to calculate a benefit from something that has so many variables and can take decades to develop. So insurance companies, single payer systems in general are just not going to provide you with what you need. The hospital systems, the doctors, the big private practices, they're all stuck in this same merry-go-round. They're all stuck in the same issues that we just talked about. Practices that do both sometimes can bridge that gap. And if you can find one, fantastic. I think they're going to become less and less common because the doctors and the people that run these practices recognize that they are putting themselves at risk by doing so, and that some of the tricks that people have done in the past probably are not going to work in the future as the insurance companies and CMS continue to close down on the system to control all of the variables. So that really puts people either in the system or out of the system. And I and many other people and colleagues that I know are out of the system very intentionally. And we need to look at health optimization, I think, in that space. Again, I would love for this Medicine 3.0 thing to happen, and man, I'd be a champion and I would be a part of it if it could. But until then, the benefit of a cash pay practice is that there's certainty in cost. You can plan for it. You know what those costs are going to be. It's a known investment, right? So again, it's just planning. We are unlimited in the cash base of what we can provide, the types of medicine, the type of products. We are not bound by insurance contracts with different pharmaceutical companies and hospital systems. We can do what's right for our patient and have that conversation with our patient. You also find typically that in this space, and this is true worldwide, where doctors that have left the traditional medical system do so out of a lot of things, but they do so because they're providing care that they know that they can ask a premium for. And this is a really tough thing as a doctor, to step out of the system and ask somebody to pay significantly more than they would in the system, because in general, that's not what we got into this for. But they do that because they know that what they're providing is extraordinary. And that's what we're providing. It is something that is extraordinary. And there is a cost associated with that. But people that have done that generally are going to provide a much better service. They're going to provide you what they think that you need. And a lot of times I find that, like I do, I've built this around the way that I would want to be treated, right? This is how I want to be treated by my doctor. And so you're going to find higher level providers, people that have built a team of true experts, not just people that they're stuck with because that's who the hospital hired. And so you're going to find a much higher level, and you're going to have to find this outside of the system. And then there is still some potential crossover in imaging and potentially with drugs where insurance companies can still pay for those things. So you're not always completely out of the system for potentially all of it. So anyway, I hope you found that helpful. I wanted to bring that out because it's something that we do answer a lot of questions on, that question of why we don't take insurance. There's a lot of anger and frustration around that. And I understand that there are people that just simply don't have the resources to pay anything in addition to what their insurance would cover. And I totally understand. That's why we use this platform, YouTube, Instagram, et cetera, to help educate people. That's why we do the free masterclass. We are also offering lower cost programs. We are basically trying to teach people how to do it themselves. So if you have questions about that, click on this link, talk to our team, visit our website. We do have lower cost programs, but to run a full service program costs money. And it's hard as a business owner to pay a team adequately. To provide benefits in the US is extremely expensive. So that brings us to the end of this controversial topic. If you found this helpful, please click the subscribe button. This will help us to help other people as well and to serve that mission of providing this free content. If you liked it, please like it. Notification signing up will give you access to notifications when we place new content on YouTube. If you know anybody that would benefit from this, please share this with them. Again, I mentioned the masterclass. The link is in the description below. I talked about talking to our team member. And again, you can click on that link up here and you can get scheduled to chat with the team member about our two programs. I do have a free book if you want to read a book for free, another thing we're doing. So the book is just recently available on Amazon as the time of this recording. Today is actually our official launch day. And so this book is a great starting point for anybody that has osteoporosis, not getting the benefits that they want, has questions about it, or is new to the diagnosis. Recommend this for anybody. Again, download the free PDF or go on Amazon and buy the full thing. And lastly, we would love to hear some comments. I know this is a controversial topic and I expect I'll get plenty of comments, but please be considerate and kind. And the community in general is that. So I appreciate you guys all for that. So that's it. Thanks again for making it to the end of this video, and I'll see you next time.